Hi, I'm Rajiv, and today I'm going to show you how to clean a paintbrush. When I was 14 years old, I was volunteering at Black Creek Pioneer Village in a shop where we did decorative painting on wood, like 19th century toll painting. Flowers, birds, using acrylic paint, which was not historically accurate. But I was in there with a Dutch lady named Linda, and she was typically Dutch, fastidious with every little thing. And she, although stern, was very nice to me. But one morning, I walked in after being there the previous day, and she looked at me and she goes, "I have a bone to pick with you." And I was like, "Ugh! What did I do? Why is Linda mad?" She goes, "You ruined my paintbrush." And then she showed it to me. And the paintbrush was a dinky, like dollar store paintbrush like this. It was a cheap brush. And I was like, in my head, I thought, what is she so concerned about this paintbrush? What happened from that moment on was not only did Linda teach me how to properly wash a paintbrush so that I wouldn't ruin it, but she taught me that if you care for your tools, no matter how inexpensive they are, you form a relationship between your tools that really affect the work that you're doing. You respect the work when you respect your tools. These brushes right here, I purchased on a trip in 1999 when I went to India as a kid with my parents. We found an art store, and these are squirrel hair brushes. I bought these after Linda had reprimanded me, and I use these brushes regularly. 1999, it's 25 years. Look at these brushes, look like they're new, because I know how to clean a brush. There are many ways to clean a brush. People will say, "Oh, that method's not right. You should really do it this way." Listen, everybody has their own way of doing things. I'm gonna show you my way. My way works. I'm never gonna go against it. You know what I mean, Heidi? Two types of paint I'm gonna talk about today: water-based paint and oil paint. There are different approaches to getting the paint out of the brush initially, but the final cleaning stage is the same for both. So let's start with water-based paint. I have some acrylic paint here. This paint works the same way as latex paint that you would be painting your walls with. It is a water-based paint that air dries and dries fairly quickly. I'm using black so you can really see what I'm talking about. And as soon as you're done painting, put it in water immediately. When you stop painting, if you're not going to pick this brush up within 30 seconds or a minute, if it's going to be longer, put the brush in water, rinse out the paint. Do not leave the brush like this. Okay? Don't just put it off like this and leave it like that, because the way the brushes actually attach to this wooden handle is through this part right here called a ferrule. And the brushes are glued. There's glue at the base of the hair, but then there's this metal part that's put on top and crimped. So there is glue in here, okay? And when you leave something like this, the water is being sucked up by the hair of the bristles, and all of these brushes, almost every single one, is pure bristle or squirrel hair. This brush right here is a synthetic brush, but this applies to all brushes. The hair of the brush is pulling up the liquid, and it's going to go into the ferrule, and it's going to compromise the glue, especially if you leave this in for a long time. So just form the habit of not leaving it like this. Rinse out the brush, and then when the brush is like this, dry it off. And if you're going to use this brush again, like if you're going to come back to it within 5 minutes or half an hour, you can wet the cloth that you're putting it in and then just fold the cloth over and set this aside like this, okay? And you can leave it like that, and you can know that when you come back to it in 5 minutes, nothing has dried out, but you've gotten most of the paint out of the brush. That's the first habit of being good to your brushes. Now, let's say I'm finished painting, okay? Finished painting for the day. I rinsed this brush out. You can see by the color of this water, a lot of paint came out of the brush. This is kind of common, we know this. And then, don't stop there. And I see this so often with people cleaning brushes. What, I washed my brush out. No, 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 no. You're not done there. You get more clean water and you put the brush in the water, swish it around, and really press. Now, this was the thing that Linda showed me that was game-changing. This place where the bristles meet the ferrule, where the metal is clamped down, that point is where the paint collects as you're cleaning it out. So as you're pressing to get out paint, it's actually also not only coming out of the bristles, but it's moving up. It's moving up the bristles and it's moving into this ferrule and it hides in there. In order to get it out, you actually have to aggressively take the bristles and turn them at a 90-degree angle to the ferrule. This looks violent. It looks like you're going to damage the brush, but while the brush is very wet, you're not damaging it. And if you do this quickly and aggressively, you push paint out of the ferrule. So this is what she showed me. Put it in the container and press. And now look at the color of the water, okay? So it's murky, but it's not black. It's not even gray. So I know that I took most of the paint out. Now you can move to the second step. With that brush, make sure it's wet. Get a bar of soap, an actual bar, not liquid soap, and put the whole width of the brush back and forth over the bar of soap. Really get the soap on there. And now I massage the bristles. So I take my fingers and I really rub in the bristles. And once all that soap is really squeezed into the bristles, I go back to my aggressive way of turning all the bristles perpendicular to the ferrule at a 90-degree angle and push. You're going to push any black paint out of the ferrule. And when you squeeze it this way, you can look close and you can see, and if there's paint in there, it will come out and the soap suds will be colored by the paint. But if all the paint is removed, the soap will just remain its white color. The soap suds will stay white. So there's no paint coming out of this anymore. That was fairly easy. Give it a good rinse. This brush has been very well loved and used and stained. The paint will stain the bristles. That's a very different thing from paint sitting in the whole brush. So the bristles are stained here, but the paint is out of this brush. That brush is cleaned. The final thing that I would do is I would soap my brush with a single stroke over the bar, and then I run my fingers along to consolidate all the bristles so that they dry together. This is kind of like putting hairspray in the brush and pulling the hair together so that it stays together. And I find that what that does is it just makes the brush look like what it looked like when you bought it from the store. When I go to use this again, as I rinse this brush off, that soap will come off. This brush, used for acrylic water-based paint. This is done. This is clean. The way Linda would set the brushes up to dry, she wouldn't set them up like this. She wouldn't put it back in here like this, because she told me that as the brush is drying, that residual moisture that's in the hair, gravity is just going to pull it down into the ferrule. And you really want to keep that ferrule as dry as possible. You can lay it on the table as long as the bristles aren't touching the table. That's why I just always lay the brush horizontally off the side of a table, and I leave it there overnight. Water-based paint, that's how you clean the brush. These brushes are my treasure brushes. These are my watercolor painting brushes, and they are my favorite brushes. They're pure squirrel hair. Pure squirrel hair holds water unlike anything else. So it really is essential for a certain type of watercolor painting. And these brushes are so expensive. Like this brush right here is $85 or $90. And when I started watercolor painting, I had 2 brushes. And I've been doing it for quite a while. So I've accumulated a little wealth of brushes here. But I'm telling you this to tell you how important it is to me to make sure that these brushes are well taken care of. The way that I washed this brush with acrylic paint is the same way that I would wash one of these squirrel hair mops. For oil paint, there's a slightly different approach. So I'm painting a landscape painting outside. I'm doing a portrait study of someone, and I have my palette, and I have my paint. And then to thin the paint, we don't use water for oil paint. We use a solvent, like paint thinner, turpentine. There are odor-free solvents. This is called Gamsol, and the solvent thins the paint, okay? So painting, painting, painting. And at the end of the session, I can put that brush down for 20 minutes and it's fine because it's oil paint. There's oil in the actual paint. So this brush is not going to dry. This is not going to dry within 5 minutes, not like the acrylic paint. This is not going to dry within 20 minutes. So it's fine to leave a brush with oil aside for a little while. When you're done painting with oils, and this is oil painting like something artistic with a small brush, but also oil painting with a big brush like this. This is the brush I used for the paint around this molding, which is oil. This is a thick boat paint. This is the brush I used. Same approach. You get a rag and you remove all the excess paint first, okay? Don't just take this brush and put it in solvent. There's so much paint on here still. And really, you can do this with the acrylic paint too. Remove the excess paint while it's still wet before you put it in the water. But this is also a method of using less solvent to clean the brush. If I was using a big brush like this, I would do the same thing. I would get a nice big rag. Don't use paper towel if you can avoid it. Use a scrap of cloth and really wipe all that oil paint as much as possible, squeezing as hard as you can to get the oil paint out of the brush. Now, we move from the rag to some solvent. There is a system that you can develop with solvent to make this process efficient. For the first rinse, I have my brush that I've wiped off. I'm not going to take fresh solvent from the bottle and pour it for my first rinse. I have a can of used solvent. When this sits for more than a day or two, the paint solids go to the bottom and the cleaner solvent rises to the top. That's what's happening in this can. I wish it was clear so that you could see that. And if I open this can and gently pour just a little off the top layer, that solvent is pretty clean. It is colored, there is a color to it, but there's not a lot of paint in there. But this is the used stuff. So in this used stuff, I'm going to rinse my brush off for the first time. And I'm pressing down on the base of this jar to get out as much paint as possible from the ferrule. Now, I get my rag and I wipe this off. And I always look at the rag to see, whoa, like there's almost nothing, there's actually nothing on this because I was faking painting. If I was really painting with this brush for a session of 5 hours, there would be paint caked on here. So you wipe it off. This colored solvent goes back into the used jar, okay? So we would pour this back in here, and really, you should get another container for the next rinse because there is pigment still in here. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna wipe this out so that it's clean. And now we take fresh solvent, stuff that is new, and you just need a little bit at this point for the second rinse of the brush. Now, if it was a big brush, I would be using a lot of solvent. So if it was a big brush that I was using for the molding, I'd be using like a yogurt container and a bunch of solvent. And that's where this system of first rinse, second rinse, third rinse, that's where it comes in handy. You don't use as much solvent when you're washing a big brush like this. In this new solvent, I really rub that brush around, and this new solvent is basically still clear. There is nothing coming out of that brush, okay? And I'm really, again, pressing down on the bottom of the jar. This gets wiped off. Check. That's really clean. This, okay, where does this go? Little quiz. This stuff is still clear. Are we going to put it in here because it's clear? No. This you have to treat like this is like the holy stuff, the new stuff. There's no back rinse, no double dipping, okay? We put, even though this is clear, this stuff goes into the used container because we used this already. And in a few days, any sediment will settle to the bottom and I can use this for my first rinse next time. This, to me and Linda, is still not clean. I would wet this brush in very hot water, pick up my soap, and really rub that brush in the soap. Now I'm showing you on a very sturdy bristle brush, but I would do the same thing if I was using one of these delicate squirrel hair brushes. Okay? If I was washing this off after rinsing it in solvent, I would really be going to town with soaping up this brush. Okay? And then once the brush is soaked up, I'm pressing hard and getting into all the bristles. And now I use for a small brush like this, I would use the palm of my hand to press. And you will see color going into the suds of a well-used brush. Color will be coming out in those suds. Rinse under running water. Okay? If any color is in the soap suds, you need to keep washing. You need to keep doing this. You need to keep bending back the bristles against the ferrule aggressively. And if you see any color coming out, keep going. You do this until no color is coming out of the brush. And with oil paint, it can take a while. This gets dried off on a cloth, just pulled through the soap once or twice. The bristles get amalgamated together, and then this gets set on the edge of a table to dry overnight. You know, when you say washing a paintbrush or cleaning a paintbrush, it sounds like a simple thing. But I learned from Linda that it's not a simple thing. There is a process to cleaning out a paintbrush. And if you have expensive brushes, it's kind of crucial to know how to do this. So there you have it, how to clean a paintbrush the way I was taught when I was 14 years old, and the way that I've been doing it ever since. I assure you that if you clean your brushes this way, they will last a very long time, and you'll also probably be approaching the work for which you use these brushes in a different way. Thanks for watching.